A man and a woman turned into the mud bottle lane. The young man wore a high crown and a green pendant around his waist. He was more like a rich child than the descendants of Lu, the richest man in the town. The age of a woman is difficult to identify at first glance. The girl's appearance, tender skin and sharp chin look like an icicle hanging on the edge of the eaves in winter. Another look, the 30-year-old style, Dan-fang eyes, enchanting posture, from head to foot, has a downward trend. When walking, the waist turns, with a lasting appeal that women in small town never have. Looking left and right, the woman was full of curiosity. She even reached out to touch the yellow mud wall. She really couldn't detect any clues. She asked curiously, "Funenhiwa, this is really one of the hidden blazer places, you said. Why didn't my ancestors mark this lane on the geomantic situation map given before?" The young man did not answer the question. "If you and I really had an unexpected joy here, how can you repay me?" The woman turned to her side and put her hands and fingers behind her, which set off the scenery of her chest and became more and more plump. She said with a half-true and half-false soft smile, "How about picking up by you?" The young man did not want her to be so straightforward, but had no rules and regulations. Moreover, he came here to visit relatives and find friends, and shoulder the important task of the rise and fall of the whole family for a century or even a millennium. No matter how kind-hearted he was, he would never dare to have a Jew Mandarin marriage with the woman in front of him in a small town in full view of the public. So he quickly changed the subject, pointed to the deep part of the alley, and said with a smile, "Xianxia, friends belong to friends and business belongs to business. I have to repeat it again. According to the previous agreement, there are two families in this mud bottle lane, a pair of master servants and a pair of mother and son. I can choose one of them first. The bad capital is the Jian, a specialty of your Xianxia mountain, which gives us 10 yuan a year to Laolongkang." The woman nodded with a charming smile. "Of course." The young man walked slowly forward and continued, "Next, once you get an unexpected opportunity here, the item must be appraised by you and our ancestors and give a fair price. Then you Xianxia mountain will take out half of the equivalent Jian and Xianxia. Do you have any objection? Or are you sure that you can do it after you agree to this at this time and here? And after your interests are successful and your bags are safe, can you persuade the grandparents of Xianxia mountain to nod their heads and approve the bet?" The woman has changed her face. She is solemn and dignified. She is different from the previous one. She looks like the fallen brother Hua Kui. She has changed into the empress of the mother instrument world. The woman, known as Xianxia of Xianxia mountain, cut the nail and cut the railway. Yes, the young man narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. He stopped and looked at the woman whose height was not inferior to his own. "It's said that you and I can form an alliance today for mutual benefit. But it's not how you and I fall in love at first sight in the like-minded. It's just the incense and fire accumulated by the ancestors and elders of Laolongkang and Xianxia mountain for hundreds of years. In case we screw up and provoke the thunder and anger of those old men, let alone Funenhiwa or Xianxia, even our father-mother, I can't afford it," Xianxia said with a smile. "So during this time in the town, we must be honest with each other and cooperate sincerely. Right?" Funenhiwa was also handsome and romantic in this dark lane. He said with a smile. In addition, double quotes. Funenhiwa looked around, took back his sight, lowered his voice and said, "We still need to be careful. Those two talents are after all. They are not Jian mountain and can't be called famous and decent. Moreover, I heard that those two guys have a very wild way and don't pay much attention to rules." The tall woman narrowed her talking Dan-fang eyes, as if she were talking. "That's why I'd Xianxia chose you, young Master Fu." Funenhiwa whispered, "Let's go." Although there were sages here to suppress and balance the forces of all parties, it's better to be careful. It's no good to capsize in the gutter. In short, can you and I jump the Dragon's Gate with a cup in one fell swoop? The proud son of heaven, who is famous for one side, became more and more firm in his heart and said silently, "The road can be expected, blocking my way, and the immortal Buddha can be killed. He looked deep into the alley and saw a thin boy coming from far away. This is our second meeting. They continued to move forward leisurely, like a pair of immortal couples who fell on earth. The tall woman also saw the boy and joked. I met him twice in the alley over the door. Do you think the boy will? She only said half of what she said. Of course. For Nanhua knew what she meant, and couldn't cry or laugh. My favorite sigh. With 600 families in the town and nearly 5,000 servants and handmaids raised by 10 families, has a fixed number of hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the town. Moreover, over the years, those good seeds with roots, bones, blessings, and origins have been secretly divided up. The reason why we can pick up the lake this time is only those great supernatural figures with unpredictable thoughts. It's just a deliberate lake. The woman also laughed at herself and blushed at her naive ideas. After hesitating, Nanhua still said, I don't know how your ancestor told you the secret of heaven. My father told me that if someone makes you feel cold after entering here, you must take the initiative to retreat and stay away. You must never disobey and provoke easily. You must never disobey and provoke easily. You must never disobey and provoke easily. After all, there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers here, which is unfathomable. Most of the people who feel bad are the opponents of the town's exploration and treasure hunt out. As for the people who make you feel close, he can be a person with rich wealth in this area and is expected to turn into his own opportunity at that time, as long as you don't kill easily and don't break the old rules. In addition, it depends on whether you buy, cheat, or forcibly seize. Xianxia's mouth turned up. It depends on our mood. She suddenly frowned. Young master Fu, why don't you let me take the local descendants of Zhao? Although I learned some local dialects before I left. Fu Nanhua interrupted the woman, shook his head and said, those big surname portals always have secret channels connected with the outside world. They can pass on some painless news under the eyes of saints without being regarded as crossing the thunder pool. They have accumulated from generation to generation and have a deep foundation. The real backers of these surnames are still slightly inferior to our Laolongkang and Xianxia mountain. In addition, they are not beautiful and easy to flourish under the pretext of outsiders. Minor matters will delay major events. If you don't want to talk later, I'll do it for you, she said with a smile. It doesn't matter. It's just to say some awkward words. I'm not so delicate. Fu Nanhua laughed it off, and Xianxia didn't say much. In the final analysis, friends who form an alliance on the way can't compare with a family. What's more, in the eyes of some ambitious people who want to preach, what are grandparents, grandchildren, husband and wife, brothers? For Nanhua's smile is quiet and elegant, like the son of a family of the world's first-class tyrants. The reason why he revealed the secret and told Xianxia his father's secret mind method is actually very simple. Compared with the other two colleagues, a dull middle-aged man and a cold girl in black, Fu Nanhua was willing to kill his ally woman, Xianxia of Xianxia Mountain. In the first step of stepping into the fence gate of the town, Fu Nanhua subconsciously reached out and held the green pendant around his waist. Laolong cloth ring. Superb workmanship. A gentleman does not go away without reason. Xianxia thought for a moment, closed his eyes, opened his eyes and said, Song Jixen. Guken ... I single quotes in L choose Guken. Fu Nanhua raised his eyebrows. Okay. It's a deal. In their view, when the boy turned left and jumped right all the way to an alley, he would unlock the door and enter. Fu Nanhua and Xianxia stepped forward quickly and said with a smile, it's a coincidence that we meet again. The poor boy came out of Guken's house. When he heard the voice, he turned around, nodded and asked, what's up? Fu Nanhua said in the fluent local dialect of the town, this is called Anai Ping Lane. I want to ask if there is a person named Song Jixen and a child named Guken living here. I'm from the capital. My family has a close relationship with Song Jixen's father. The sister next to me, surnamed Sai, is from Guken's mother's family. So we go together. We happen to be in the same lane. You say it's a coincidence. I feel that everything is together. What a coincidence. Fu Nanhua smiled calmly. even if he talked to the straw sandal boy at the bottom of the city well. In order to take care of the boy, he bent slightly and always maintained this posture to talk to the boy. He did not appear pretentious and made people feel ill-intentioned, but also made others feel gentle, courteous, frugal, and modest. The young man, with his head tilted back, smiled shyly and whispered, "It's a coincidence." For Nanhua smiled more intensely and said in a warm voice, "So do these two families live?" The young man shook his head and said, "I was an apprentice of a dragon kiln not long ago. I have lived outside the town for many years. I just moved here and am not familiar with the neighbors. Do you want to ask someone else?" For Nanhua smiled. He was not in a hurry to speak Dutch. He seemed to be brewing wording. The tall woman smiled and said, "Little brother, it's not good to lie down. Do you think we look like bad guys? Back 10,000 steps. What bad things can we do in broad daylight? Chen Ping and blinked. But I really don't know." Xianxia resumed his usual words and asked for Nanhua, "Does the child want a reward?" For Nanhua's face was as usual. "Not like." The tall woman's eyebrows and eyes showed a touch of hidden shallow irritability. "It's really no good. We can find people if we ask them door to door." For Nanhua waved to her and patiently coaxed the teenager. "Do us a small favor and I'll give you something. How about it?" The boy scratched his head. His body was thin and his eyes were clear. For Nanhua suddenly stood up straight. As a result, I saw a bookish teenager squatting on the wall not far away. Looking at them, near the young man in elegant clothes, there stood a young girl with her upper half of her face clean and clean, with dye-like eyebrows and eyes. At that moment, for Nanhua was determined that the young man in front of me must be in my bag. The boy stood up and asked gladly, "Are you looking for someone?" For Nanhua and Xianxia had to look up. The former said, "Yes, I'm looking for you. The sister next to me wants to find Gokan. Can you help?" The boy frowned and said, "Do you know me?" For Nanhua said with a smile, "Of course I don't know you, but I know Lord Song, who works in the Ministry of Rights now." Xianxia asked bluntly, "I can help you find Slug Gokan. What's the advantage?" Without saying a word, for Nanhua took off his green belt and threw it high to the boy standing on the low wall. "It's yours." After Xianxia started, he was slightly frightened, and his face was no different. He bowed his head and said to his maid Jigwei, "Go." She nodded and went out of the yard. When the girl stood quietly in the narrow lane, the whole mud bottle lane seemed bright in an instant. For Nanhua smiled at the straw sandal boy and said, "Little guy, I'll give you a word. Although the rain is wide, it doesn't moisten the rootless grass." Then he took the lead to the girl. The tall woman didn't move. Her eyes were playful. She whispered to the boy, "Do you know what it means?" Her eyes were shining, and she was not interested. Before the boy answered, she said with a smile, "Actually, it's just to tell you that you missed a great opportunity. As long as you pick a little from his fingernails, you can live a very moist life at the foot of the mountain in your life. But fortunately, you should never know what you missed today. That it's really lucky in misfortune, or you'll have to regret." For Nanhua listened and thought she was casting pearls before swine. Outside the town, the gap between people, especially the difference between high and low, is even greater than the gap between yin and yang. Xianxia walked backward to the maid. So he was facing the straw sandal boy. "Although the rain is wide, it does not moisten the rootless grass. Remember." The boy didn't change his look, but suddenly said in a loud voice, "Be careful behind you, ... Xianxia suddenly became stiff. The boy lowered his voice. "Shush." Xianxia walked backward at that time. In fact, when she stepped on that foot, she already realized that things were bad. The more unbearable thing than stepping on dog shit is, of course, stepping on it and being seen by others. The more tragic thing is undoubtedly the person who sees it and tells you that you really stepped on dog shit. Xianxia is not a shallow woman, let alone a delicate daughter who can bear hardships. As one of the many descendants of the master of Xianxia Mountain, she can stand out and win the final quota, which can explain the problem. Xianxia Mountain has a total of 18 peaks in size, so that it is surrounded by smoke all year round. It is rich in cloud-rich stones. It is an important material for the Taoist standing set to refine weight, and it is famous for its flawless and scale-free and is unique in the world. Therefore, people on Xianxia Mountain must pay attention to cleanliness, simplicity, and elegance. Most of them are addicted to cleanliness. Of course, Xianxia is no exception. If the town had not been too involved, Xianxia would never have set foot in the town in her life, let alone let her walk foot by foot in the mud bottle lane full of chicken dung and dog shit. The most embarrassing thing is that after coming here, they, who were originally high fairies, were like little fish thrown ashore. Suddenly, they lost all their dependence and occupied a certain cave and fell into the sea. There are no mysterious magic weapons to resist the wind, subdue demons, and command gods to control ghosts. Then, there was the scene of Xianxia stepping on dog shit. Xianxia originally thought it was interesting. The spotless fairy CAO of Xianxia Mountain, a brood of sticky smelly dog shit. Who dares to believe it? But the next moment, Xianxia shouted in a deep voice, "Xianxia, stop!" Standing on the mud wall, Xianxia's pupil shrinks and holds the carved dragon green pendant in his hand. In the lane, Xianxia seemed to step in front of Chen Ping'an. Her slender hand, glittering like lanolin and jade, quickly patted on the celestial cover of the straw sandal boy. At the moment Xianxia made a noise behind her, she suddenly stopped her palm, finally gently lifted it up and gently patted it. After completing the intimate action that seemed to be spoiled by the elders, she bent down, staring at the young man's eyes. Like a clear spring, Xianxia can almost see her face from there. It's a pity that she is in a terrible mood. She smiled and said, "Little guy, I know you deliberately slowed down when you speak." Xianxia breathed a sigh of relief. If Xianxia really dared to kill here, he would probably be expelled from the town and made the whole Xianxia Mountain the laughing stock. His face was gloomy, and he reminded her in orthodox Mandarin, "Xianxia, please think twice before you act. If you are still so impulsive next, I think it is necessary to give up the covenant. I don't want to be hurt by you." Xianxia, with his back to the young master of the old dragon city, whispered quickly, "The top grade sees the Buddha speed. The bottom grade sees the Buddha light. There is really pure land. There is really a lotus pond." She quickly turned her head and smiled apologetically at Xianxia. "It's my gaff. I promise that similar things will never happen in the future." Xianxia Lang said with a smile. "Are you sure?" Xianxia left it off without telling Xianxia how to make a solemn pledge, looked down at the straw sandal boy again, and said to himself in the popular Mandarin of Yizhou, "Xianxia Mountain comes from one of the 5 Buddhism sects, and most of all I want to subdue the hard ape and tie up the Italian horse. But before I came here, I couldn't figure out what the hard ape and the Italian horse are. The family elders never want to encourage it. They just let me explore by myself. I didn't want to step on a piece of shit in your mud bottle lane today. But let me note as a clue. Double quotes champing and reminder. Sister, you stepped on dog shit for most of the day. Why don't you scrape it off quickly?" The fairy girl originally felt that she had entered a Buddhist Pure Land state of mind. After hearing the speech, she immediately broke her kung fu and fell back to the secular world. Her face was iron blue. However, Xianxia's warning still echoed in her ears. She had to vent her anger. She stretched out a finger and poked it heavily on the forehead of the straw sandal boy. She stared. "At a young age, hasn't anyone told you that being cranky is a sign of early death? And being mean is a person who cuts blessings?" Chen Ping'an's skin was rough and fleshy. He didn't care. He just looked at Xianxia not far away and didn't speak. The latter jumped and scolded, "Chen Ping'an, what do you think I'm doing? It's really unlucky." Xianxia was surprised to find that he was unhappy before he stepped into the yacht of Xianxia. He made no secret of his sarcasm. "Xianxia, it's really interesting. There are people in the world who have delayed the pace of Changshan Avenue for a lump of dog shit." For the first time, Xianxia was not angry. She took a deep look at the thin boy who didn't look amazing. She turned and left. Suddenly, The young man behind him whispered, "Sister, your eyelashes are very long. How dare the vulgar mole ants flirt with the fairy goddess?" Jian flew into a rage and turned his head suddenly. He made up his mind to teach this seemingly simple and honest, but actually cunning villager a lesson even if he lost some spirit. Although Jian and his disciples were detained in a cage, tied their hands and feet, and hit a wall everywhere when they entered here. All the magic tools were temporarily out of control, but the benefits of self-cultivation since childhood, such as being able to feed their bodies after entering the house, seemed to be quenching all the time. Although the effect of training muscles and bones is not significant, which is far better than that of the martial arts people who focus on this way. It is easy to deal with a teenager who was struggling in the mud of the market, and use his hands and feet on some important orifices, so as to plant the root of the disease and break his young life. But in the slightly dark lane, she only saw a dark face and bright eyes. The moon shines on the sea. Jian's eyes lit up first, and then some women's natural compassion came up. Finally, in her Danfang eyes, she faded away the pity a little bit, and she became more and more bright and suddenly realized that it's a chance to kill the demons. It is necessary to know the origin of Xianxia Mountain, which is close to Buddha and far away. Since the founding father Xianxia Old Fairy, he has always respected the view that every origin and extinction is a robbery. Of course, there is no fixed number of theorems in this way of getting through the robbery. All the authorities need to solve the mystery and solve the situation by themselves. For example, the current Jian, she felt that she had found the young man who needed to suppress and subdue, who seemed innocent but actually had obstacles. So she raised the palm again, covered the young man's heart, and pressed it gently. All these actions were as fast as thunder. Even if the young man consciously withdrew half a step backward, he could not resist the hand of the tall woman. For then he was stared at the charming and graceful figure. Instead of having any beautiful ripples in his heart, he was murderous and almost condensed into a heart of stone. He deliberately covered up his killing opportunity and deliberately shouted angrily. Previously, you flicked your finger on the young man's forehead, making him sick all the year round. That it's enough to punish him once. Why, Jian, are you crazy? Do you really want to ignore the opportunity of the road for the sake of a cheap seed? Jian turned a deaf ear. For then he lowered his voice and restored the grace of the children of the aristocratic family. With a touched smile, he said, "It's not embarrassing for Jian of the Grand Xianxia Mountain to haggle over every detail with a stray boy." Jian turned around and said with a smile, "This alley is really destined for me. That I can get a chance wherever I think of it. Although it's no big mosquito meat is also meat, that it's a good sign. I have more confidence in the boy named Gukan." For then Yuan was stunned. Does this woman really have an epiphany? Jian raised one foot, saw the disgusting filth, and said with a smile, "It's really lucky." Song Jixen's face was gloomy and uncertain, and he couldn't see the change of his mind, though no one paid attention to the magic way. Standing in place, silent, at one moment, two pairs of pale golden pupils appeared in her eyes. One eye and two eyes. For then he felt vaguely. He suddenly turned his head and looked around quickly. He didn't notice anything different. Finally, he looked up and down at the girl-servant girl. There was nothing wrong. He had to regard this discomfort as Jian's behavior, which attracted the gaze of the sage in the town. Jian was in a good mood. He had accumulated a lot of stagnant ideas before, and the flat burst down the dike. More than a small chance. If it weren't for the hollow Xianxia Mountain, she really needed an immortal family heavy weapon of sufficient weight to suppress the constantly leaking gas of the mountain gate. She also needed this to establish her position as the mountain leader. Otherwise, Jian would like to leave here immediately and return to Xianxia Mountain for 10 or 20 years. Jian walked to Fu and he was made in the shabby alley. The boy behind him asked, "Did you do anything to me?" Jian didn't answer. "Little guy, you think too much." The boy kept silent. Jian looked back and smiled. "You'll die in half a year at most." The boy was stunned. She smiled softly and said, I really believe it that my sister lied to you, Chen. Pain and grinned, Xianxia and Funnanhua. The immortal men and women had an idea in their minds almost at the same time. Frog at the bottom of the well, Mo and at the foot of the mountain. Xianxia, squatting on the wall to watch the play, rubbed his temples with his hands. His face was very rare and serious. Even if Jigwei had already taken the eccentric sister to find the slug can, and the young guy who threw a lot of money when he didn't agree also walked into his yard, Xianxia, with exquisite mind, still squatted there in a daze. In the sight of the outstanding youth of the Son of Heaven, there was a thin youth standing in the mud bottle lane. After looking at the back of the tall woman for a while, he soon converged his sight and walked to his own courtyard door. But the firewood door had not been pushed open for a long time. Xianxia hates this feeling. There is a guy who usually doesn't show mountains and do, but at some time, he is like a stone in a pit. He doesn't move. It's inconvenient, and it's too dirty to move away, so that Funnanhua's words behind him were not heard clearly by the boy. The young master of the old dragon city had to repeat, Xianxia, do you know that there is a kind of person in the world that is very different from you? Xianxia finally regained his consciousness, turned and continued to squat, looked down at Funnanhua, who was high-crowned and elegant, and said plainly, I know. Funnanhua had to swallow a word that had run to his mouth, but he was still a little unwilling. He smiled and asked, I really know. The mysterious town boy with cold eyes sneered. Do you want to say that they are people of life and death? Flesh and bones, long-term vision, and boundless Taoism. Funnanhua nodded and said happily, we can count as half Taoist friends. From the corner of his eye, Xianxia glanced at the door next door, slightly absent-minded and out of time. Funnanhua was open and fair. Then I'll open the skylight and tell the truth. No matter what you have, as long as you are willing to make a price, I'll smash the pot and sell iron and buy it. Xianxia wondered. I can see that between you and that woman, your family status should be higher, since she can treat the guy next door like that. Why are you willing to treat me like this? Funnanhua took the initiative to answer. On an equal footing, Xianxia nodded and praised. You're a good man, though it's not hard to talk to you. Funnanhua didn't care about the boy's condescending, whether it was his position or his arrogant tone of speech. Unlike Jian's view of straw-sandal teenagers as humble mole ants, Funnanhua was not only close to Xianxia, but also in all of the area of Mud Bottle Lane. So Funnanhua really regarded the young man in front of him as a fellow believer. On this avenue, the more you move forward, the higher and lower your status. The difference between men and women, and your age are vain and meaningless. Xianxia jumped down the courtyard wall and whispered, Go inside and say. Funnanhua nodded and said, Okay. When Xianxia stepped into the threshold, he asked carelessly, Just ask, what's the relationship between you and that sister who is easy to bear? Funnanhua said without hesitation, For the time being, they are a group, but they are not passers-by. Xianxia said something inexplicable. Then you're too sloppy to do things that it's not refreshing at all. I've heard that the world outside is full of immortals and demons, but as long as you are a person of practice, if you have gratitude and resentment, shouldn't you cut the grass and eliminate the roots and never suffer from the future? The eldest son of the Fu family, after all, is a descendant of the immortal family who grew up in Laolongkang. He is used to seeing big winds and waves. After hearing this, his face doesn't show any emotion. He asked with a smile, Do you have a feud? The boy opened his eyes and pretended to be surprised. What are you talking about? It seemed that he found that the man in front of him didn't believe it at all. So Xianxia converged his pompous look on his face, took the lad to sit down in the lobby chair, stretched out his hand and motioned Funnanhua to sit down, and then said seriously, I have been a neighbor for so many years and have never had a quarrel. Believe it or not, Funnanhua immediately understood the boy's obscure meaning. The boy next door is helpless and rudely stockweight. If you die, you will die. No one will investigate this matter. The young master of the old dragon city couldn't cry or laugh. He suddenly realized that the storm in this alley had been absurd and funny. It can be said that the poor boy next door deliberately concealed the address of Song Jixin's master and servant, which caused a sudden disaster and would suffer and die. It was just now that this Song teenager, he seemed to have been born in the family of Zhang Ming and Ding Shai, wanted to kill people with a knife and kill people. One knife is not enough, one more knife. For Nanhua couldn't help but sigh with emotion. No wonder the corpse said, the son of a tiger and a leopard, although unridden, has the smell of eating cattle. In the yard of Gu Kan's house, the child has been locked by his mother in the inner room, and the woman sits opposite the old man who calls himself Shanzhen. The old man put away the palm lines and crisscross palms, smiled and said, the overall situation has been decided. The woman wondered, what did the mortal master do just now to make Champion An? Speaking of this, she found that the old man's eyes suddenly burst into sharp lights, which scared her to shut up. The old man looked at the gate of the courtyard, gently brushed his sleeve, brought a brace, and wandered around the courtyard. The old man said, when a person of my identity gets involved here, the more he is trapped in the helpless situation of Mad Buddha Saba crossing the river. Although it's not hard to protect himself at present, the longer it takes, the more. Well, as Song Jixin said, it's called dragging mud with water, and he can only mess with the consequences. The good thing is that the man is angry. Even if he has taken a step back, it's still late. I pity that the situation that was expected to enjoy the incense for thousands of years turned into a terrible situation. Taking this opportunity, I can make some plans for your son to see if I can not only end the young man's life, but also cut off some saints and immortals in the future, so as to avoid the worries of settling accounts after autumn, so that my new disciple can ascend the immortal road in the future. Finally, with the wind and thunder, it turns into a dragon. The woman sat on one side, intermittently, listening to sweating. The old man asked with a smile, isn't it strange that he is clearly a foreigner who eats xia, drinks stew and ignores worldly affairs? Why do he devote himself to cultivating Taoism and practice around and around, as if he only cultivated such a city government hostility? An ignorant village woman who is shallower than you. The woman quickly lowered her head and said in a trembling voice, I dare not think so. The old man left it off and waited quietly for Cai Zhenjian of Xianxia mountain to knock on the door. On the road of cultivation, there are boundless skills and infinite magical powers. Reason has size and Dao has height. Cai Zhenjian regards you as mole ants. Does Ben Shenzhen no regard Han and Funan as mole ants? What's the reason with the mole ants under your face?